I was supposed to be Blue Star's most terrifying 3S-class Ghost Emperor. But every day, I only wanted to lie flat and scroll short videos. Then the reborn school beauty found me, and she insisted on exposing me to the entire nation. She even demanded that I become Great Xia's guardian, because she knew the nightmare coming 1 year later. In 1 year, every anomaly on Earth would awaken. When that day came, the whole world would collapse. And if Great Xia wanted to survive, I was its only hope. Right now, I stared at Ji Ruyan kneeling before me, and at the familiar aura hidden inside her body. My gaze sharpened. Speak. Who are you? Where did you come from? And how did you discover my existence? Hearing this, Ji Ruyan did not hesitate for a second. Lord Ghost Emperor, I come from the future 15 years from now. I am the Saintess under your command, and you will be the last hope of Great Xia, the guardian god of all its people. Hearing Ji Ruyan's words, I slowly narrow my eyes. For someone like me who has long stood at the world's peak, to the point where there is nowhere left to go, any unknown is worth savoring, let alone an unknown that involves my future self. An SSS-class Ghost Emperor, ending up as the savior of humanity? This script is a bit too dramatic. After a brief pause, Ji Ruyan looks at me. Lord Ghost Emperor, you don't need to know the unnecessary details for now. You only need to understand one thing. Great Xia needs you, and Great Xia can help you break through the SSS class. This is a win-win situation. You need further nourishment to advance, and Great Xia happens to be able to provide it. Hearing this, my eyes begin to flicker. An SSS class Ghost Emperor is invincible under heaven. Yet there is no further path to progress. And now, this woman is actually telling me there is a way. These words are not something an ordinary human should know. The future is too vague. Tell me something specific. Don't try any tricks. Only a future that can be truly verified will make me consider your request. Hearing these words, Ji Ruyan's heart finally settled. She knew she was already halfway there. She nodded without hesitation, and immediately began her tale. Meanwhile, at the Department of Ghost Affairs in the capital, a meeting that would decide the fate of countless lives was underway. At the head of the table, Director Lu Xian of the Ghost Affairs Department slowly stood up. Based on satellite surveillance and confirmation from multiple frontline scouts, can be preliminarily determined that the S-class anomaly, the Hungry Ghost, has changed its route, its target direction, the capital. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's expression changed drastically. They frantically asked, "Is it confirmed? If this is true, we must immediately activate Level 1 evacuation and summon all A-class and above ghost users nationwide. We cannot let it get near the capital." Hearing this, Lu Xian raised his hand to signal for silence. I understand everything you're saying, but the biggest problem right now isn't whether to fight or not, but how to lock onto its position. You are well aware of the Hungry Ghost's habits. If we mobilize the entire nation's strength, but it suddenly changes direction and attacks other cities instead, it will result in an epic catastrophe. With that, Lu Xian looked toward the buildings. Only S-class ghost user Ji Wuming, I need you to lead a team of A-class ghost users, centered around the capital, to conduct high-frequency patrols. The moment it shows its face, strike immediately. But just as he finished speaking, the communication system in the center of the room suddenly flashed red. Everyone's heart tightened. Lu Xian connected instantly, and a holographic projection appeared before them. In the image was Chun Yang, the captain of the frontline tracking team. His voice was urgent and grave. "Director, the Hungry Ghost has moved. It's accelerating. Target direction, the capital." Immediately after, a real-time trajectory map was projected, a blood-red path of movement, like a sharp blade, pointing straight at the heart of the capital. At the same time, the core system of the Ghost Affairs Department suddenly blared a piercing alarm. "Warning! Warning! S-class anomalies path detected, intersecting with an S-class protection target." The next second, a location map was forcibly enlarged. A name was clearly marked on the red path. Yiruyan. Ji Wuming, who had barely maintained his composure, suddenly bolted upright from his seat. "What? Why is Xiaoyan there? Quickly, notify Li Feng immediately. Tell him that no matter what happens, get Xiaoyan out of there first." Meanwhile, After Ji Ruyan's unfiltered and exhaustive account, I had basically confirmed one thing. What she said was most likely true. I withdrew the terrifying aura that shrouded the world, and halfway up the cemetery hill, Li Feng, who had been frozen for a long time, suddenly relaxed. He gasped for air, as if he had just escaped from drowning. Immediately, he opened his communicator, which was ringing so much it was hot. A virtual screen popped up instantly. Dozens of red alerts flashed frantically. When he saw the words "Hungry Ghost," he looked sharply at Ji Ruyan. "Miss, run. The Hungry Ghost is coming." However, Ji Ruyan remained unfazed. "No need to run. I know that Hungry Ghost is merely an S-class anomaly, with the Ghost Emperor here. How dare it be so presumptuous?" Meanwhile, on the road less than a mile from the cemetery, a surging mass of black mist was advancing rapidly. Within the black mist were countless shriveled and twisted faces. This was the S-class anomaly, the Hungry Ghost, and just as it was about to step into the cemetery, I, who had been contemplating with closed eyes, slowly opened them. The next second, the aura of an SSS-class Ghost Emperor quietly radiated outward. In an instant, the entire cemetery seemed to be forcibly ripped away from the real world, and the figure of the Hungry Ghost, which had been rushing forward, froze instantly, as if pinned to the spot by an invisible giant hand. Then it began to twitch like a marionette. At the same time, Ji Wuming arrived outside the cemetery by plane. He drew his long blade and struck down with a slash. The Hungry Ghost's domain shattered instantly. Everyone finally saw everything inside the cemetery. They saw me, and the Hungry Ghost dancing at my feet.
Ji Wuming's gaze met mine.
The next second, he felt as if the surrounding air had been vacuumed out. Even the S-class anomaly, that had coexisted with him for years, was trembling in this moment, as if driven by an instinctive terror. But fortunately, Ji Ruyan walked over at that moment. Only then did the anomaly within him regain its calm. "Father, you don't need to be so wary of the Ghost Emperor. He harbors no ill will toward us." As soon as these words were spoken, they exploded like a thunderclap inside and outside the cemetery. Ji Wuming's throat went dry. He stared intently at his daughter, as if seeing her for the first time. "Ruyan, what are you talking about?" But Ji Ruyan did not evade his gaze. Instead, she nodded solemnly. "Father, I am telling the truth. This is the Ghost Emperor, an SSS rank existence. I came here specifically to see him today." As soon as she spoke, a dead silence fell over everyone present. SSS rank, that level itself is like a taboo, an existence humanity has never truly faced. After a long silence, Ji Wuming finally couldn't hold back. "Ruyan, do you realize what you're saying? SSS rank is no longer just an anomaly event. It is a natural disaster. How could you possibly know of its existence? Why are you siding with him?" Hearing this, Ji Ruyan took a deep breath. "Father, Director Liu, what I am about to say concerns everyone's future and whether you will all survive, because I have returned from the future. I am a regressor." As soon as she spoke, Lu Xian's voice carried an unprecedented gravity. "Ji Ruyan, you must understand, you cannot speak such nonsense. Director Liu, if I were lying, you would find out very soon. But if what I say is true, then what you're hearing now is just the tip of the iceberg. 1 year from now, on a global scale, the overall strength of the anomalies will undergo a qualitative change. Humanity will completely lose the initiative. The anomalies will no longer be mere disasters, but will become the top of the food chain. After that, cities will no longer be shelters for humans, and shelters will be nothing more than coffins delaying death. Humans will be dragged into the eerie realm while wide awake, slaughtering each other in hunger and fear. As soon as she spoke, the scene fell silent once again.
Ji Wuming stood frozen.
He knew his daughter too well. Ji Ruyan was not one to exaggerate, and certainly not one to joke about such things. The grief and dread on her face weren't acted. It was the emotion only someone who had witnessed the apocalypse could possess. At the same time, inside the command center, the Nuwa system began operating at high speed. A moment later, cold, hard data appeared on the main screen. The content matched current anomaly trends by 99%. Seeing this, Lu Xian fell silent. His hand gripped the edge of the table tightly, but Ji Ruyan didn't give him more time to hesitate. "Director Liu, I recall the Great Xia's Project Dragon Ascent has already been officially implemented, right? Those words struck the command center like a bolt of lightning. Lu Xian looked up abruptly, his voice losing its composure for the first time. How do you know about Project Dragon Ascent? Ji Ruyan didn't answer, but asked instead, have those chosen genius anomaly hunters never reported back to you? The frequency of anomaly activity is rising, and the stability of the Eerie realms is increasing. Lu Xian could no longer refute her because he had already pulled up the relevant data. Every single file confirmed Ji Ruyan's words. The command center fell completely silent. But just then, a calm voice suddenly rang out. It was me speaking. Project Dragon Ascent. Is that plan of yours to use genius anomaly hunters to fight against the anomalies, right? I recall it was launched not long ago. I even took a look at it specifically. With those words, Lu Xian's expression became incredibly grim. Right then, he finally understood what it meant to be a higher dimensional existence. Their secrets were perhaps never secrets to begin with. Ji Ruyan continued to describe the future. The anomalies erupted on a full scale, and nations fell rapidly. Even Great Xia could barely hold on, until the day the Ghost Emperor appeared. 10,000 anomalies besieged the capital, and humanity fell into despair. But the Ghost Emperor suppressed them all alone. From then on, Great Xia was able to survive. The Ghost Emperor is the final guardian of Great Xia, and I became the Saintess, responsible for communicating with the Ghost Emperor on behalf of humanity. But it all still came too late. In the end, Great Xia was surrounded and wiped out, becoming a sacrifice. The world headed toward destruction. But now the future can be changed. Director Lu, are you ready to make your choice? Hearing this, Lu Xian remained silent for a long time, then slowly exhaled. Lift the alarm. Block the news. Wu Ming, take Ruyu and stay at the base. After speaking, Lu Xian disconnected the communication. After speaking, Lu Xian cut the transmission, carrying the complete video records and the deduction results from the Nuwa system, and headed straight for the true heavenly palace. Meanwhile, at the cemetery on the outskirts of the capital, your father is calmer than I imagined. Hearing this, Ji Ruyan responded softly, because he is an anomaly hunter. People like us have known for a long time that this world was never safe. Hearing this, I didn't answer, but simply smiled. My gaze seemed to pierce through space. Let's go. They are waiting for us. After speaking, I tore through space and stepped inside. Inside the inner cabinet, Lu Xian, who was still discussing other matters with Elder Li, suddenly felt the air abruptly turn cold. The next second, two figures appeared out of thin air. Without warning, without any alert, they stood right before him. Hello, Director Lu, and hello to the Supreme One of Great Xia. As soon as he spoke, the air in the conference hall seemed to freeze. The next second, above the hall, the Nuwa system suddenly blared a piercing alarm. Highest level anomaly target locked. Threat level immeasurable. Recommendation: immediately execute maximum protection protocol. All personnel, enter level 1 combat readiness. Almost simultaneously, the heavy alloy doors were pushed open, and a large number of fully armed guards and anomaly hunters streamed in. The sound of weapons being cocked echoed repeatedly. Runes flashed. Eerie energy surged. The already small conference hall was instantly packed to capacity. The air was thick with an overwhelmingly oppressive killing intent. Lu Xian immediately stepped in front of Elder Li, his expression tense, his gaze staring intently at me. With just one word from Elder Li, this place would become a real battlefield in a second. But Elder Li simply stood up slowly and raised his hand. That's enough. Everyone get out. Lu Xian paused for a moment, but eventually nodded. Soon, only 4 people remained in the conference room. Elder Li was the first to break the silence. Mr. Ghost Emperor, how should I address you? Looking at your appearance, you seem like an ordinary citizen of Great Xia. I am curious, are you entities also transformed from humans? Hearing this, the corners of my mouth curled slightly, because I knew very well what this old man truly wanted to confirm. Wasn't the answer itself, but my allegiance. Elder Li, entities are not transformed humans. At least I am not. This current form is simply to make moving around Great Xia more convenient. After all, dressed like this, wouldn't you find me more approachable? Upon hearing this, Elder Li paused, then smiled. Yes, indeed, quite approachable. I took the opportunity to sit down. My posture relaxed. Just call me Qin Feng. Now, we can discuss my cooperation with Great Xia. Since, as my saintess said, I will become the guardian god of Great Xia in the future, then it is time to seriously discuss this matter. Lu Xian and Elder Li exchanged a glance. Lu Xian spoke first. In that case, in 1 year, Great Xia will face a true entity awakening. We must act in advance. With the help of your power, Lord Qinfeng, we shall purge all entities within the borders of Great Xia. At the very least, we must ensure that before the full awakening, the foundations of Great Xia will not be shaken. Simultaneously, this will reduce the number of enemies you may face in the future. And we will use this opportunity to mold you into the true guardian god of Great Xia. As the words fell, a brief silence descended upon the conference hall. It was a mad plan, yet it was a plan that could not be refused. Ji Ruyan nodded in agreement without a moment's hesitation. My lord, this is currently the optimal solution. Looking at the future timeline, this is indeed the way. The power of faith is the key to your future breakthrough. These words were like unlocking a hidden answer. I was momentarily stunned. Then, countless thoughts flashed through my mind. Entities can also become gods. Once this idea surfaced, it could no longer be suppressed. After a moment, I nodded slowly. I understand. I am also well aware of the basis of our cooperation. Moreover, these entities are not just meant to be purged. If used correctly, they can also become your strength. For example, that hungry ghost. Rather than sealing it away, it would be better to give it to my saintess. Elder Li was delighted upon hearing this. Then it settled. Director Lu, you have full authority to coordinate their actions. From this day forward, the state machinery of Great Xia will operate at full speed for this plan. As for me, this old man has other matters to attend to. I'll leave the rest to you. Having said that, he left the conference room. As for the three of us, we headed to the training grounds. I looked up at Ji Ruyan, my tone casual. Well, my saintess, are you ready? These words sent a slight tremor through Ji Ruyan's heart. Then, she revealed an extremely rare smile. Lord Ghost Emperor, everything is ready. Let me feel the power of this hungry ghost. Hearing this, the corners of my mouth curled slightly. Then, with a light wave of my hand, an invisible force descended like the falling sky. The hungry ghost's originally cold, greedy, and restless aura was forcibly compressed in that instant, as if gripped tightly by an invisible giant hand. A barely audible wail echoed from within the ghostly energy. It was a scream of instinctive terror. My gaze was cold and calm. For Ji Ruyan's safety, I left no room for hidden danger. The hungry ghost's power was ruthlessly stripped, suppressed, and reconstructed by me. In the end, only a level barely reaching grade C remained. That should do it. This is the safest state. It ensures safety, while allowing Ji Ruyan to truly experience the essence of an S-rank entity. With those words, I tossed it casually. The hungry ghost slowly merged into Ji Ruyan's body. Instantly, the power to control ghosts erupted like a tide. Her aura climbed steadily. Ji Wuming, who had just returned from the base, saw this scene, and his pupils instantly contracted. He saw it clearly. This wasn't simple control, but a downgraded inheritance. The essence of the S-rank entity was fully preserved, but its power was safely encapsulated within a controllable range. What did this mean? It meant that this method could be replicated. An hour later, the aura in the training grounds gradually subsided. Ji Ruyan slowly opened her eyes. In that moment, her entire temperament underwent an earth-shattering transformation. Lu Xian could no longer contain his emotions. The excitement on his face was almost overflowing. It worked. It actually worked. Mr. Chun, if this ability can be popularized, the Great Xia Ghost Control Bureau will be completely transformed. We will become the best in the world. Please start this plan immediately. Let every single member of the Ghost Control Bureau become your believer. I simply nodded indifferently. This is part of the cooperation. Besides, the stronger they are, the more valuable they become to me. I said this without any disguise, which shocked Lu Xian, but he said nothing more. He immediately turned and left the training grounds, beginning to mobilize the entire Capital Ghost Control Bureau. Meanwhile, Ji Wuming walked up to me and said respectfully, Mr. Ghost Emperor Chun, if it's possible, I hope you can help me once. He didn't say it too bluntly, but the meaning was clear. He wanted power. I looked at him, my gaze calm. After a moment, I nodded. No problem. You are my saintess's father, and that is enough." These words shook Ji Wuming to the core. He didn't hesitate any longer and sat cross-legged directly on the training ground. I raised my hand, and the power of the entities slowly spread. The suppression of the entity within Ji Wuming's body happened naturally and effortlessly. After a moment, the ritual ended. So this is how it feels. He finally understood where his daughter's transformation had come from. Simultaneously, on the other side of the capital, in a place of shadows that had been intentionally ignored, the air suddenly turned ice-cold. Dozens of ghostly figures gathered silently. They were diverse in form, their auras gloomy, but without exception, every single one was an S-rank entity or higher. If their ghostly auras were fully unleashed, they would be enough to cover the entire capital. But at this moment, they were forcibly restrained by some power, because in their very center stood an even more terrifying existence. SS-rank malicious entity. Issy has vanished. We've lost another companion. Do you really intend to keep hiding? Right now, in the capital, the human population is at its peak. It's the perfect feast. Rather than being picked off one by humans, we should storm the capital directly and catch them completely off guard. Hearing this, the other entities nodded in agreement. Soon, driven by the malicious entities will, one silhouette after another, quietly slipped into the dark corners of the capital. Their goal was clear, to hunt humans. But while the entities were quietly positioning themselves, inside the capital's Ghost Control Bureau, a true metamorphosis was taking place. The training ground gates opened time and again. Wave after wave of bureau operatives, under Lu Xian's personal arrangement, entered the temporarily sealed zone. Meanwhile, the disappearance of EC was like a boulder dropped into a still lake. Encrypted intelligence reports were swiftly sent to the core agencies of various nations. Question after question was raised repeatedly in international intelligence meetings. Some even proposed a more alarming theory. Has an SS-rank ghost user appeared in Great Xia? But the moment the thought surfaced, it was immediately dismissed, because in the current understanding, an SS rank is equivalent to an uncontrollable disaster. It's a power no single nation could possibly withstand. While the world was still frantically analyzing the data, Great Xia did something that left the whole world stunned. The announcement was transparent, released simultaneously to the public and the world via official channels. Across the entire nation, the plan to popularize ghost powers was officially launched. The moment the news broke, the whole world seemed to hit a pause button. Ghost users from countless countries almost thought they had misread the intelligence. The internet exploded instantly. You have to understand that globally, ghost users have always been extremely rare and dangerous. Even the most powerful nations only dared to cultivate them on a small scale. For one reason: the loss of control rate is too high. Yet Great Xia chose this exact moment to announce ghost powers for all. This wasn't just aggressive, it was borderline insane. Could only be described as a madman's gambit. But facing the overwhelming skepticism, the government offered no further explanation, only reiterating that the operation was about to begin. A week passed quickly. With my help, all the veteran ghost users had finally gained full control. I stood inside the conference room, my voice calm. Everyone, you all know exactly what this operation means. This isn't to prove my worth, but to show everyone that ghost power isn't a death sentence. The entities in the capital have been restless lately. Since they want to come out and play, let's give them that opportunity. As my words fell, the entire Ghost Control Bureau, like a precision machine, began to operate at full speed. Orders were issued, and squads deployed rapidly. Following the designated routes, they began to compress the entities across the capital. And almost at the same time, in a hidden area of the capital, the lurking entities finally began to move. One by one, they emerged from the shadows, murderous intent surging, a ghostly riot, because they knew very well that the Ghost Control Bureau had moved. This wasn't a probe, nor a local purge, but a full-scale assault to root out every single entity in the capital. Meanwhile, at the Bureau's training grounds, hundreds of drones formed a stable array in the sky. Crystal clear footage was streamed to the entire building. and across the globe. In the frame, a group of fully armed ghost users stood in formation, and standing at the very front was a man in a security guard uniform. Many people's first reaction was, is there something wrong with the camera? But soon some noticed the positioning. They realized all the ghost users were subtly centering around that security guard. Skepticism instantly turned into shock. Ha ha ha, is Great Xia out of people? A security guard leading the purge? What kind of new joke is this? Inside the White Eagle's Ghost Management Bureau livestream, S-rank ghost user Mant lay lazily on a luxurious divan, surrounded by beauties, swirling his wine glass, yet his gaze remained fixed on the center of the screen. Interesting. The fifth rank is actually standing behind him. This man is not simple. However, the entities in the capital aren't just for show. Thinking they can wipe them out in one go is too naive. Not just him. At this moment, top ghost users from around the world were almost all watching this live stream. They wanted to see just what gave Great Xia the right to be so arrogant. And as the world's attention converged, I finally spoke in the frame. Everyone, I am Chen Feng. I will be leading the Ghost Control Bureau in the operation to annihilate the entities. After speaking, I pushed my hand forward. Space cracked like a mirror, and a gate constructed from pure ghostly power slowly took shape. Behind the gate was surging darkness, suffocating malice, the nest where countless entities dwell. The live stream was crystal clear. For the first time, the world truly saw the ghost realm. The moment the gate opened, every entity within the ghost realm, regardless of strength, regardless of whether they were sentient or not, froze completely. An instinctive terror spread wildly through their bodies. Conversely, on the ghost user's side, they were like they'd been injected with adrenaline, stepping forward with resolve. When they reappeared, they were already before the malicious entity. The battle officially erupted. The ghostly land instantly became a slaughterhouse. The entities were torn apart piece by piece. Countless citizens of Great Xia watching the stream felt their skin crawl. Some couldn't help but exclaim, "Why don't you all just surrender and become Great Xia's ghosts instead?" I watched this scene, my expression still calm, but my eyes held a hint of approval. Under my influence, these ghost users' control over the entities within them far exceeded anything before. They were no longer being eroded. They were truly mastering the power. Soon, the number of entities dwindled at a visible rate. Even those S-rank entities hardly had a chance to make a full move. The moment they showed their faces, they'll be swarmed. This scene left ghost users worldwide terrified. Are they insane? Aren't they afraid of dying fighting like this? Using anomaly powers so recklessly? Do they not care about their lifespan? This was the shared question of every ghost user globally. But when their gaze fell upon the battlefield of Ji Wuming and the malevolent ghost, they fell completely silent. An SS-rank malevolent ghost was actually being suppressed by a single squad. Seeing this, Mantle felt his mind go completely blank. During their last encounter, they were evenly matched, but now the gap had widened to a degree he couldn't comprehend. But he soon realized that I was the key to it all. The S-rank ghost users of other nations felt the same. Soon, intelligence agencies worldwide were activated. They began frantically investigating everything about me, but at the same time, they faced an even bigger headache. Domestic pressure. Because the public was exploding, previous comments belittling Great Xia were being dug up one by one. Yet even so, some were still throwing fits. Some still refused to accept reality. The White Eagle's president didn't hesitate for a second. Immediately, he contacted Morris, the head of the Ghost Department. Staring at the screen, he asked if the White Eagle could do what Great Xia did. Can we, the White Eagle, achieve this? If we launched a similar operation, what would our chances of success be? This was a probe, and a deep longing. If the White Eagle could replicate such a victory, everything that came before would be wiped clean. Their prestige would be pushed back to the pinnacle. However, facing these questions, Morris remained silent for a long time, long enough for the president's brow to furrow deeply. Finally, Morris looked up. His face was pale, his voice nearly spiraling out of control. "Impossible, Mr. President. This is absolutely impossible to achieve." As he spoke, he pointed to the screen. his voice trembling slightly. Do you see it clearly? S-rank anomalies don't even have the right to attack. That person isn't even human. If such an anomaly appeared in the White Eagle's territory, it wouldn't be a disaster. It would be a slaughterhouse. If these anomalies lost control here, we would all be easily. The president fell silent. He wasn't stupid. He knew Morris's judgment was correct. So we just watch Great Xia step all over us? Morris took a deep breath. Then he suddenly spoke. Mr. President, we can't do it, but we can make them pay a price. Ghost users have never been a blessing. They are an omen of misfortune. Not everyone can handle that truth. Those words made the president's eyes light up instantly, right? If we can't beat them, we can make them wretched. We can shift the conflict. We can incite fear. As long as the public realizes what it truly means to be a ghost user, then at this moment Great Xia's glory will be swallowed by shadows. Even if it's only a part, it will be enough. The president quickly made his decision. Almost every mainstream media outlet in the White Eagle, at the exact same time, began flooding the public with a single theme: the curse of the ghost users. The headlines were, more terrifying than the last, even more lethal, was that the White Eagle released the real deal. Vast amounts of once top-secret data were released without reservation. Footage of ghost users losing control, cases of anomaly backlash, data curves of plummeting lifespans, interview footage of mental breakdowns, cruel and real, unedited. Right then, global public opinion exploded. At first, doubts were constant, but as the real footage unfolded before their eyes, more and more people fell silent. Even the most popular livestream of Great Xia's Anomaly Zone was briefly suppressed. The focus of the world began to shift, and while the world was on the real battlefield, the outcome was already decided. At the end of the battle, Ji Wuming stood before the malevolent ghost. That once arrogant SS rank anomaly was now breathless and exhausted. Its malevolence was almost completely depleted. 99% of its origin had been shattered.
Ji Wuming grinned. Hehehe.
Be careful, brothers. This is the key to my advancement. With that, the blade fell. The malevolent ghost vanished completely. Immediately after, a terrifying and fresh aura, soared from within Ji Wuming, had become a true SS rank ghost user. The live stream erupted instantly, and high above, I looked down upon it all. Invisible power of faith surged into my body like a tide. Finally, a satisfied smile curled on my lips. Fellow colleagues, today is our moment of victory, and my first official appearance as the long-hidden guardian deity of Great Xia. To celebrate this victory, I will give every ghost user present here a chance to advance. You deserve a reward. Once these words were spoken, not only the public watching the screen, but even those battle-hardened ghost users who had seen endless death were all shaken. Everyone knew one thing: advancement for a ghost user is never a reward. It's a high-stakes gamble. Once you fail, at best, your mind collapses. At worst, you turn into a new anomaly. Because of this, across the globe, more and more countries had begun to restrict the existence of ghost users. And yet, here I am on a live stream, in front of the whole world, offering these ghost users another chance to advance. Everyone's first reaction was doubt, especially those who had personally felt the pain of advancement. They sneered in disbelief. They knew all too well the feeling of an anomaly awakening within, consciousness being eroded, and sanity crumbling bit by bit. It was something no external force could interfere with, not even an S-rank ghost user. Nor could anyone's advancement be safe and harmless. In the entire system of ghost hunters, this had long been the accepted iron rule. And at the same time, within the weird zone of the capital, every ghost hunter of Great Xia turned their gaze toward me. Their eyes were completely different from those of the skeptics worldwide, because they were the ones who had witnessed miracles firsthand. And now, the moment they had long awaited had finally arrived. I slowly raised my hand. The next second, all the remaining eerie power in the weird zone was completely mobilized by me. Above the sky, a massive vortex seemed to form. It wasn't an uncontrolled contamination, but a perfectly refined, restructured, high-quality eerie power. It descended from the heavens, pouring precisely into every ghost hunter's body. The ghost hunters felt the restlessness within them. The eerie power that could backlash at any moment suddenly became unprecedentedly quiet and obedient. Advancement became as natural as water flowing in a channel. Right then, every ghost hunter worldwide fell completely silent. And as the last wisp of eerie power was completely absorbed, the entire weird zone of the capital finally returned to tranquility. The black mist in the sky slowly dissipated, as if it had never existed, and that area which once inspired dread and made people pale at the mere mention, also at this moment, completely lost its original eerie characteristics. One by one, the capital's ghost hunters slowly opened their eyes. Their aura was now completely different from before. No longer chaotic, no longer restless, but stable, even carrying an indescribable pressure. That was the aura of a successful advancement. One ghost hunter, who had already prepared for the worst, now had reddened eyes, tightly clenching their fists. So it turns out, advancement really doesn't have to come at such a cost. These words, like a needle, pierced deeply into the hearts of all the ghost hunters present. The next second, they all dropped to one knee, shouting in unison, "Lord Zwafong, thank you. If it weren't for you, I might have died during my next advancement. From this day forward, my life belongs to Great Xia, and it belongs to you." These words, transmitted via live stream, reached every corner of the globe clearly, and the impact of this scene was far more terrifying than the advancement itself, because it meant I was no longer just a powerful individual. I was becoming a symbol that ghost hunters were willing to follow, and even entrust their lives to. And such an existence, for any nation, is enough to keep the high-ranking officials awake at night. The heat in the live stream room had already shattered historical records. The servers nearly crashed several times. The bullet comments were so dense, they almost completely covered the screen. The emotions of the people of Great Xia had been completely ignited. For the first time, they realized, in this era of eerie resurgence and collapsing order, that behind them, there truly stood someone they could entrust their future to. And this shift was soon reflected on a deeper level. Countless strands of faith power were converging from all directions, transforming into the most tangible power, surging into my body. Simultaneously, on the other side of the world, almost every country with a ghost hunter system convened a top-level emergency meeting at the same time. The theme of the meeting was only one: Chen Feng. Just what on earth is he? If this ability cannot be replicated, how are we supposed to respond? No one could provide an answer because everything in the footage had completely exceeded their existing cognitive framework, especially those countries that had previously advocated for the total restriction of ghost hunters. Their expressions were the most unsightly right now. They suddenly realized they might have picked the wrong side. And inside the White Eagle's ghost hunting department conference room, the atmosphere was oppressive to the extreme. Morris sat at the head of the table, remaining silent for a long time. He knew better than anyone that, after today, the rules of the world had quietly changed. Finally, he spoke. "We must admit one thing. Zwafong is no longer a ghost hunter in the simple sense. He is a variable that cannot be measured by traditional means. If we continue to treat him with the mindset of the past, we will eventually be phased out by the era." These words plunged the conference room into a deeper silence. After a long while, someone asked in a low voice, "Then what should we do?" Morris looked up, his gaze complex. Either find a way to recruit him, or be prepared to be left completely behind. And at the same time, you, the center of the conversation, looked into the distance, frowning, because you discovered that the growth of faith power was not as rapid as you had expected. Only those ghost hunters who had truly experienced my grace would truly view me as a miracle, and thus grant me more faith power. It seems I have already chosen my path, I muttered to myself, a flash of determination in my eyes. However, just as I was contemplating the future, the international situation on the other side underwent a sudden, massive change. Robert, the president of the White Eagle, was standing at the front of the government conference room, his brow furrowed. He looked at the report in front of him, his expression grave. A being like Chen Feng absolutely does not belong to Great Xia. His abilities should belong to all ghost hunters worldwide. Ghost hunters from all our nations should have an equal opportunity to receive his grace. We cannot allow Great Xia to continue monopolizing Chen Feng's power. We must take action to pressure them to make Chen Feng provide opportunities for advancement to ghost hunters globally. Hearing these words, Morris nodded. Correct. We must unite all our forces to pressure Great Xia, demanding they make Chun Feng's abilities public, and even demanding that Chun Feng serve ghost hunters worldwide. The other countries nodded in agreement upon hearing this. Soon, a massive storm of public opinion erupted. From the White Eagle to the land of the setting sun, on the social media of almost every country, discussions about me were rampant. Netizens from every nation were using every possible means to express their longing for my abilities, even directly pressuring their governments, demanding they take action to make me serve all ghost hunters worldwide. Countless comments like these were shared and liked across the media. Thousands of posts and comments on social platforms gradually converged into a powerful force, driving the direction of global public opinion. And at the same time, the Capital Ghost Hunting Agency seemed to have entered a strange atmosphere of celebration. Every ghost hunter's face was filled with joy and excitement. On the noisy training ground, all the ghost hunters stopped what they were doing. All eyes were on me. Since you've all emerged victorious, then get back to your posts. Keep this momentum of victory going. Remember, you all belong to me now. I won't allow a single one of you to fall. Yes, my lord. Their voices were filled with confidence and determination. They had no doubts, because at this moment, I had completely conquered their hearts. They knew that this god would not let them fail. Their victory, only under my leadership, would become truly indestructible. However, just as they were preparing to leave, to continue their missions, Lu Xian walked in, her expression somewhat grim. Chun Feng, come with me. There are some issues outside. We need to discuss them. Hearing this, I frowned slightly, feeling a bit surprised, but a faint smile soon appeared on my lips. Let's go. And when Lu Xian and I arrived at the conference room, I was met with a group of leaders looking grave. They were discussing a critical decision. Seeing me arrive, Elder Li greeted me with a smile. Mr. Chun, there are already voices rising outside. People worldwide and various governments have begun demanding that Great Xia share your abilities. Some have even openly declared that your power should belong to the whole world. Hearing this, I only gave a cold laugh. If they want my power, then they will have to pay the price. Elder Li nodded slightly. You are right, Mr. Chen. We truly cannot bow to any nation. Since they want it, let them come to us. Great Xia fears no threat. We will let the world know that you are the guardian god of Great Xia, and no one can take you away. Then Elder Li began to explain the national ghost hunting plan that Great Xia was about to launch. The core idea of this plan was to fully implement my abilities so that every citizen of Great Xia could become a ghost hunter. Through this method, Great Xia would no longer rely solely on me, but instead build a powerful army of ghost hunters that no one could shake. Mr. Chen, the National Ghost Hunting Plan is ready for launch. We hope you can assist us in pushing this plan forward. Using your power, allow every citizen of Great Xia to ascend and become ghost hunters. I narrowed my eyes, thinking for a moment, and finally nodded. I can help you. I can even create avatars for the ghost hunting department in every city, splitting off my consciousness to ensure that ghost hunters in every region can receive my support in a timely manner. After speaking, I turned to look at Ji Ruyan. From now on, we are not just the commanders of the ghost hunting department. Through these avatars, we can ensure that the department in every city can obtain my power. This is not just a victory for Great Xia, but a victory for all humanity. Elder Li and other high-ranking officials nodded in succession, well aware of the immense significance of this plan. As long as my power could be widely spread, Great Xia's status would become unprecedentedly powerful, even becoming the center of the world. However, as the National Ghost Hunting Plan launched, the reactions of countries worldwide grew more intense. The governments and people of the White Eagle and other nations began to direct increasingly fierce protests and demands toward Great Xia. They demanded that Great Xia disclose my abilities and allow ghost hunters from all nations to receive my help. The Great Xia government's response was blunt. He is the guardian god of Great Xia, and no nation has the right to demand we hand him over. Our national ghost hunting plan is a decision made for a stronger future. If other countries are willing to cooperate, we can share resources, but we will never allow any nation to threaten Great Xia's sovereignty. My own response was even simpler and more direct. If you really want to find me, then come. I'll be waiting for you in Great Xia. Meanwhile, inside the conference room of the White Eagle Nation, when the secretary repeated Great Xia's response, the entire room fell into a deathly silence. Morris suddenly stood up. Say that again. Hearing this, the secretary's face turned pale, but they braced themselves to repeat. They said if there are any issues, they can come directly to Great Xia to find the man named Chen Feng. They aren't afraid of us. The sentence was like a heavy hammer, smashing hard into the chest of everyone present. The Great Xia of the past, which would compromise under international pressure, or even proactively explain itself, seemed to have vanished overnight. In its place was a completely strange, completely rule-breaking opponent. Robert, sitting in the main seat, had a terrifyingly grim expression. He found himself suddenly uncertain. War was impossible, or at least it couldn't be a full-scale war. But if they did nothing, the prestige of the White Eagle would completely collapse on a global scale. Damn it! How dare they? How dare they provoke us head-on? For the first time, Robert's heart truly wavered, and what made it worse was that the other national representatives present had stopped speaking. They were all waiting for the White Eagle to take a stance, waiting for Robert to take responsibility, because they knew better than anyone that the so-called joint pressure was essentially just a political performance. No one actually wanted a full-scale war with Great Xia. No one wanted to pay the price for someone else's ambition. Time ticked away second by second, and finally, under the gaze of countless eyes, Robert slowly spoke. Since Great Xia chooses to be hardline, we cannot back down either. Full-scale war is unrealistic, but supernatural matters shall be settled by the supernatural. Notify all nations. Dispatch their strongest ghost hunters to Great Xia. I want to see if that guy who calls himself a god can actually face an entire army alone. As his voice fell, the room first went silent, then many secretly breathed a sigh of relief. They hadn't completely burned bridges. Instead, it was Ghost Hunter against Ghost Hunter. This was the most acceptable outcome for them. This is for the best. Let the supernatural handle the supernatural. We are merely observers. Agreement echoed throughout the room, and some had even begun imagining their victory, popping champagne. However, just as they raised their glasses to celebrate, the territory of Great Xia was already boiling over. My declaration and the official statement were released simultaneously, instantly igniting all of Great Xia. Countless citizens of Great Xia felt their blood boil with excitement. For the first time, they realized so clearly that the state was truly standing behind them, and without a single hesitation, the public outcry for ghost integration reached its absolute peak at this moment, and all of this was exactly the rhythm Great Xia had prepared. At the same time, inside the highest spec suite of the capital's Bureau of Ghost Integration, I slowly opened my eyes, my gaze seeming to pierce through space. The next second, countless figures with an aura identical to mine separated from my body, then turned into shadows and vanished into the void, racing toward every corner of Great Xia. After dispatching all my clones, I slowly stood up, looking out the window, a slight smirk playing on my lips. I hope you're all a bit smarter, and don't disturb my preaching. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind teaching you how to be. At the same moment the order was issued, the Great Xia government officially released the highest level notice. The National Ghost Integration Plan is officially launched, and almost simultaneously, through big data screening, a list of compatible candidates was directly notified by the local bureaus of ghost integration. No application, no registration, only a calm and authoritative prompt. You meet the criteria for the first batch of ghost integrators. Please report to your local bureau within 24 hours. Right then, all of Great Xia erupted. Holy shit! I made it. I actually got chosen. Ha ha ha. I'm fucking becoming a ghost integrator. The moment countless ordinary people saw the notice, they could hardly believe their eyes. Some were shaking so hard they couldn't hold their phones. Some collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. Others spun around in circles with excitement, like a middle-aged man who just won a 30 million lottery, instantly losing interest in all worldly troubles. Soon, the first batch of selected citizens began entering the local bureaus one after another. They were led to specially designated ghost integration zones, and there, my clones were waiting silently, conducting a perceptual screening. Those with truly stable minds, who craved power but weren't consumed by greed, were successfully accepted, but those with impure intentions, the supernatural forces within them spiraled out of control. Screams were brief and piercing, followed by absolute silence. All of this happened silently. Nothing was announced to the public, and no one felt pity, because the Bureau had already made it clear. Becoming a ghost integrator is never a right, but a qualification, and when the first complete set of statistics was delivered to the cabinet meeting room, even Elder Lee and the others, who were mentally prepared, were still left speechless for a moment. Strings of numbers jumping across the screen were clear and staggering. The number of new ghost integrators far exceeded all expectations, and their stability was terrifyingly high. Seeing this, Elder Lee couldn't help but laugh out loud. Now, even if the West attacks all at once, we no longer have to fear them. The next day, when the first wisp of the power of faith flowed back from the clones to my original body, I snapped my eyes open. The power of faith surged in like a torrent, no longer a scattered, weak supplement, but a true explosion of energy. I instantly realized one thing: my previous judgment was correct. Faith does not come from bystanders, but only from those whose fates I have truly changed. After figuring this out, I vanished in a flash. When I reappeared, I was already standing in my own graveyard. Black clouds began to gather in the sky. The bright daylight was rapidly swallowed by shadows, an overwhelming supernatural aura that blotted out the sun. Like an ancient being awakening from its slumber, I stood there silently. A metamorphosis was taking place, and at this moment, the only human in the graveyard who could still stand and remain conscious was Ji Ruyan. She stood at the edge of the graveyard, separated by a faint, invisible boundary. It was the power leaking from me unconsciously, perfectly shielding her from the destruction. Ji Ruyan looked up, gazing at the figure completely shrouded in darkness and the supernatural, her heart beating violently beyond her control, not out of fear, but out of awe, because she had seen this aura before, in her past life, in that future consumed by countless horrors and endless despair, in the final battle that nearly wiped out Great Xia. That was the figure of me standing alone above Great Xia, facing off against all the horrors of the heavens. In that battle, Ji Ruyan had witnessed SSS rank horrors, being torn apart like ants. She even remembered that the SSS rank entities she saw fighting numbered no fewer than dozens, let alone those at the very peak of the supernatural pyramid. Terrifying beings whose ranks couldn't even be defined. And now, in this era, she was feeling that aura once again. This meant Great Xia's choice was correct. It meant the future had been changed. And outside the graveyard, in the cabinet meeting room of Great Xia, the atmosphere was equally heavy, yet filled with an undisguisable shock. On the giant screen, the real-time feed showed the scene in the graveyard, looking like the apocalypse. Elder Lee and the other high-ranking officials all watched the screen in silence. Even though they had witnessed my power once before, seeing this metamorphosis, they still couldn't remain calm. At the same time, the Bureau's dispatch system had fully activated. Countless ghost integrators were deployed around the graveyard, forming several lines of defense, not to provide support, but to prevent any entity that shouldn't be there from approaching. Because everyone knew very well that the graveyard right now wasn't a battlefield, but a god-level bomb that could detonate at any moment. Soon as time ticked away, I finally moved within the graveyard. I slowly lifted my head. The next second, a shattering sound beyond description echoed through heaven and earth. Then I officially stepped into X-rank. The supernatural power rolled back like a tide, receding and condensing once more. Right then, I finally understood completely. The path Ji Ruyan had once spoken of. Faith is not void, but the fuel for a ghost emperor's ascension. My gaze fell upon the figure at the edge of the graveyard. Ji Ruyan was looking up at me, her eyes burning with passion and devotion, like a believer waiting for a divine miracle. It's time I gave you some reward. I spoke indifferently, my voice not loud, yet echoing clearly through the graveyard. Ji Ruyan, my believer, I grant you power. The moment the words fell, heaven and earth trembled. Endless, infinite supernatural power converged from all directions, surging frantically toward Ji Ruyan. She widened her eyes, then let out an uncontrollable gasp. The supernatural force within her reached a boiling point at this moment. Her level is skyrocketing, and inside the cabinet meeting room, On the other side of the screen, everyone could clearly see
J Rui en S aura.
approaching S-class at a visible speed energy index. Wuming, your daughter has truly encountered a heaven-sent opportunity. Ji Wuming didn't speak, but his hands were trembling slightly. It was both pride and relief. The breakthrough in the graveyard ended. Ji Ruyan slowly opened her eyes. Her aura had completely evolved, but I looked into the distance, frowning slightly, because there was a malicious call, crossing a vast distance, falling into my perception. Someone is calling my name, not with awe, but with hostility. A cold smile slowly curled on my lips. In the next second, my figure vanished instantly, and at the same time, the ghost hunter forces from various nations gathered at the border of Great Xia finally stepped onto the soil of Great Xia. Steve, captain of the American Ghost Hunter Task Force, said in a deep voice, "Everyone, one last check. Once we enter Great Xia's territory, all actions must remain coordinated. Report any abnormalities immediately. Do not venture deep on your own." As he spoke, Steve's gaze swept over the crowd, only to find that his words didn't command everyone's attention. Instead, a contemptuous sneer echoed from the crowd. "Captain Steve, aren't you being too nervous? It's just entering Great Xia, not directly facing that so-called god. Besides, you're not the only S-class ghost hunter here. So my suggestion is that I take over as temporary commander. We'll advance faster and more aggressively. That's the only way to truly flush out the so-called guardian of Great Xia." I disagree. This isn't a stage for individual heroism. We are here to probe, not to deliver ourselves to death. But just as he finished speaking, the leaders of the ghost hunters from other nations began to look at one another. After a brief silence, some nodded, some agreed. It's not impossible. After all, Mr. Yamashita is an S-class vanguard. We do need a commander strong enough. The more aggressive the action, the easier it is to lure out the target. Soon, the tide began to turn. Steve watched this scene, his expression growing increasingly grim. He realized that this team could never truly be unified from the start, and Yamashita naturally saw this as well. His smile grew even brighter. "Of course, since I'm in command, my Japanese squad will naturally lead the charge. No problem. Then it's settled. The vanguard is yours. We'll handle the support." Thus, the operation was quickly finalized. The international ghost hunter forces officially began their advance. First, everything was normal. Scattered anomalies were easily cleared, causing many to secretly breathe a sigh of relief. However, the moment they ventured deep inside, the sky suddenly turned dark without warning. Steve immediately sensed the anomaly and looked up, but it was already too late. Endless darkness poured down from all directions, instantly swallowing the entire team. Hundreds of ghost hunters fell silent at that moment. They finally realized what kind of place they had stumbled into. What's happening? A domain?
Impossible.
Retreat. Retreat now. Terrified screams echoed one after another. Yet, amidst this chaos, Yamashita suddenly burst into wild laughter. Then, instead of retreating, he advanced, taking a sudden, bold step forward. However, I merely gave him a faint glance, and then uttered a single word: "Ignorant." The voice wasn't loud, yet it echoed clearly in everyone's ears. The next moment I raised my hand. "Everyone, your collectors have arrived." As the words fell, within the darkness, eerie figures slowly emerged one by one. They were diverse in form, their auras terrifying. The hunt had officially begun. Screams soon drowned out everything. The scent of blood permeated the entire forest. In a short amount of time, the battlefield was completely sealed. Not a single ghost hunter could escape. And in the capital, inside the cabinet meeting room of Great Xia, everyone witnessed it all through the satellite feed. That scene became the most unforgettable image of their lives. Is this the power of a god? Lu Xian's voice was dry and strained, even though he had witnessed such power countless times, even though he was mentally prepared. But when he truly saw the border, the complete image of that battlefield, his mind still inevitably went blank for a moment. And beside him, Ji Wuming no longer cared about his image. Leaning forward, he pressed his hands firmly onto the conference table. "So it can be done this way. So the end goal of a ghost hunter isn't to fight the anomalies, but to transcend them." Right then, He felt as if he saw a brand new path, a path leading to the true domain of God. In contrast, Elder Li and other high-ranking officials of Great Xia remained exceptionally calm. The smiles on their faces weren't out of simple ecstasy, but a composure that comes after the dust has settled, as if everything had been expected.
Elder Li spoke slowly.
The guardian of Great Xia, this is our greatest trump card, and the very foundation upon which Great Xia will stand in the era of supernatural revival. Immediately take all the footage data and seal it for backup. This is strategic level footage and the best evidence for Great Xia to flex its muscles to the world. And at the same time, at the border of Great Xia, with one last piercing scream, the hunters vanished completely. The battle finally came to an end. The forest returned to an eerie silence. Upon the ground, corpses lay scattered everywhere. Some were eroded into a grayish-white by supernatural power. Some still wore expressions of terror from the moment of death, including Yamashita. None of the invaders survived. They had been brimming with confidence, believing they were merely here to probe. But until the moment death arrived, they finally understood that they had been on the wrong side from the very beginning. And my figure stood atop a sea of corpses, my expression cold. There was no joy of victory, because to me, this was nothing more than crushing a swarm of insects. And 10,000 miles away, inside the American National Conference Room, the atmosphere was the polar opposite of the building's grandeur. Robert's hand gripped the edge of the conference table tightly. His face had turned deathly pale. Just moments ago, they were listening to real-time audio from the front lines, via an encrypted channel. It was meant to maintain control of the situation. But now, it had become utter psychological torture. Those heart-wrenching screams, squeezed from the depths of the throat, made everyone present shudder instinctively, even without visuals. They could imagine what kind of hellish scene it was. Robert's Adam's apple bobbed. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to fear Great Xia. Until now, the so-called Great Xia threat was mostly a political and military theory. But now, that threat had become visceral. The meeting room fell into chaos. What exactly happened? What on earth did Great Xia do? Are they hiding something? Activate Plan B immediately. Deploy the reserve team for reconnaissance right now. Do not enter Great Xia. Self-preservation is the top priority for all operations. The orders were swiftly executed. Shortly after, the White Eagle's second supernatural team arrived at the Great Xia border. This team was small in number, but armed to the teeth. Captain James was a seasoned A-rank hunter. The moment he stood at the border and looked toward Great Xia from afar, he froze completely. The sky was gray and low, as if it could collapse at any moment. In the distance, a supernatural aura surged like a tide. Even from kilometers away, it made his heart race in panic. That wasn't pressure. It was a warning. A blatant warning. James instinctively raised his hand. The entire squad immediately entered maximum alert. Even so, he still felt a wave of suffocation. We shouldn't go any further. Set up the streaming equipment. Send the footage back. There is no need for us to advance any further. Once this was said, no one objected, because everyone knew one more step would be suicide. And the moment the live signal was established, I, at the center of the battlefield, slowly looked up. A barely audible chuckle escaped my lips. So we have an audience. With that, I deliberately retracted part of my supernatural domain to give the camera a perfect angle. The next second, the earth shook, the hills collapsed, the straight, empty road appeared in the frame. On both sides of the road were mountains of corpses, and atop those bodies, under the gray sky, the souls of countless victims were hung high. Their piercing wails then spread across the world via the live stream. At that moment, whether it was the reserve team at the border or the global leaders watching the footage, they all fell into the same silence. They finally understood one thing. What stood before them was a god in the truest sense. The oppressive atmosphere in the meeting room lasted for over 10 minutes. Finally, a voice broke the silence. Since we can't beat them, let's just lick their boots. The moment those words were spoken, the entire room went silent for a second. The speaker was Yamamoto Jiro, the head of supernaturalists from the Wa country. He stood up, without a hint of shame on his face. Instead, he sounded completely justified. Everyone, our warriors, have used their lives to reveal a fact, that Great Xia is not an opponent we can afford to provoke. Since that is the case, why continue sending people to their deaths? What we should do is immediately shift our stance, and cooperate with Great Xia, rather than continuing to play the role of ridiculous opponents. After these words, following a brief silence, voices of agreement began to emerge in the room. For a time, words like cooperation, peace, and misunderstanding were repeated, as if only a few hours ago they hadn't been plotting that border probe together. Pragmatism was displayed in its purest form at this moment. Soon, a so-called preliminary cooperation plan was hammered out amidst chaos and fear. Ultimately, Robert of the White Eagle, as the most heavyweight representative, would step forward to hold official talks with Great Xia. Meanwhile, before the bloody aftermath at the border had fully faded, I had already returned to the capital and appeared in the meeting room. The little mice at the border have been cleaned up, but those people will likely come to negotiate with you soon. As soon as I finished, Elderly couldn't help but laugh out loud. As expected, you see through everything. We guessed their intentions long ago. However, this time, we actually do need some external resources. With the progression of the National Supernatural Plan, Great Xia's internal supernatural resources have started to show signs of shortage, especially for mid to high tier assets. The demand far outweighs the supply. This is a practical issue. I naturally thought of that as well. I said calmly, let them open their borders. We need the supernatural assets of neighboring countries. I believe they will be more than willing. The moment this was said, the eyes of everyone in the cabinet lit up simultaneously. Since it's cooperation, they should show some sincerity. Just opening the border is a bit too perfunctory. As the words fell, a round of tacit laughter echoed in the meeting room once more. I did not participate further in the discussion. I had already done what needed to be done. Then I left the cabinet with Ji Ruyan, since she is now called the saintess by the world. Strength is the best response. Next, Ji Ruyan needs to prove to everyone that she deserves the title. But while I was in secluded training, Robert, thousands of miles away, finally couldn't sit still. Fear was eroding his sanity second by second. He knew very well that delaying further would only make Great Xia's conditions more severe. An emergency video conference was connected. Elder Li's figure appeared on the screen.
Dea Li.
Regarding everything that happened at the border, we deeply regret it. That was entirely Steve's reckless individual action, and has nothing to do with us. The White Eagle has always loved peace. We hope to establish a friendly and in-depth cooperation with Great Xia. He spoke a great deal in one breath, his tone humble, and his posture extremely low. But Elder Li just looked at him quietly, waiting for him to finish, before calmly replying, "Are you done?" Robert was stunned. Done? Good. Now it's my turn to speak. With that, Elder Li listed Great Xia's demands. In just 10 minutes, Robert's face had turned bright red. Elder Li, this is highway robbery. Li, this is robbery. Li, this is straight up robbery. Do you even know what you're saying? Demanding we open our borders and pay compensation in essence from 100 S-class entities. This is absolutely impossible. If we agree, we'd be traitors to our country. This is a death sentence for us. Hearing this, Elder Li didn't waver. He simply gave a slight smile and then nonchalantly asked a single question. Are you sure you want to refuse me? Think it through. Do you really want the guardian gods of Great Xia to head over to your side and have a little chat with you? As soon as these words were spoken, Robert's breath suddenly hitched. A deathly silence fell over the conference room. The suffocating feeling was like an invisible hand slowly squeezing everyone's throat, and this crushing pressure fell almost entirely upon the White Eagle's commander, Robert. In his mind, scenes involuntarily flickered, images from the border battlefield. At this thought, Robert's mind actually grew calm. He looked up at Elder Li on the screen, not agreeing immediately, but pretending to be profound. He said, "This has too great an impact. We need an internal meeting to discuss this. The next session will resume in 10 minutes. With that, He cut the video communication without hesitation. The screens in the room went dark instantly. Robert turned around, his gaze sweeping across the heads of the entity controllers from various nations. Make the calls. Report exactly what happened to the people backing you. The White Eagle has already decided to agree. As for whether you follow suit, that's your own business. Once this was said, many faces instantly turned grim, but no one refuted him because they all knew very well that Robert was speaking the truth. The next second, phone rings echoed one after another throughout the conference room. Meanwhile, inside the Great Xia cabinet meeting room, Elder Li and the others weren't idling either. They were also preparing for the upcoming situation. Because once the nations officially agreed to the terms, Great Xia had to provide some sweeteners, otherwise the cooperation simply couldn't last. But whether this would strengthen other nations' foundations, this question wasn't a problem at all in the eyes of Great Xia's leadership, because I had already spoken with Elder Li privately. Any entity controller who advances through special means, regardless of nationality, regardless of status, cannot escape my influence. At best, they become fanatics. At worst, they become servants. In other words, from the very beginning, this was an unequal partnership. Great Xia wins once, and the faith system wins again. Total, absolute victory. And Lu Yen could almost imagine the scene. If things really develop to that point, then we, Great Xia, will essentially control the global entity system. This isn't just a rise, this is total dominance.
Elder Li nudda.
His gaze deep. A golden age is not far off. Release the video. Let the people of the world see how their country's entity controllers died. As he finished speaking, Lu Yen immediately clapped and laughed. Good, let them see it clearly and break their spirit completely. The technicians acted swiftly, uploading the pre-prepared video footage across all major global internet platforms. All headlines were seized by a single image at the same time. The global population fell silent. Previously, they were clamoring, demanding their governments deploy troops immediately to fight a brutal war against Great Xia, to seize the benefits of Great Xia for themselves. But now, seeing these images with their own eyes, all voices came to an abrupt halt. Many people instantly recognized the identities of the entity controllers in the video. Those were their country's trump cards, the true elite, the absolute elite. Yet now, like livestock, they were slaughtered and tortured. Fear spread rapidly, and public opinion instantly flipped. Citizens within each country began to apply joint pressure. And when the leaders of each nation realized that things had spiraled completely out of control, they were already in a predicament they couldn't escape. Great Xia was waiting for their answer, and their own people were waiting for their answer. If they couldn't provide a satisfactory explanation, what awaited them was to be torn apart by their own people. Finally, inside the National Conference Room, the grim-faced heads of the entity controllers exchanged glances. Just as Robert had predicted, they had no other choice. Agree, or everything will be ruined. In the end, everyone bowed their heads. Robert's expression couldn't have been any worse. It was the stiff expression of someone pushed to the brink, yet forced to maintain a facade of dignity. The air in the conference room was so oppressive it was nearly suffocating. Events had completely spiraled out of his control. He never imagined that Great Xia would be so decisive, so resolute in exposing the entire truth to the public. No cover-ups,
No diplomatic buffers.
and certainly no so-called diplomatic tact. This was a blatant coercion to force their surrender. How did they dare? Robert's knuckles tightened instinctively, cold sweat seeping into his palms. And just as the room fell into a deathly silence, a voice was the first to break the silence. Yamamoto Jiro, the head of Japan's entity controllers, stood up. Your Excellency, we must make a decision quickly. Japan has finished its deliberations. We surrender. And as Japan completely bowed, other nations followed suit one by one. No one mentioned dignity anymore, nor did anyone dream of a comeback. Watching this, Robert actually felt a flicker of exhausted relief. Things had come to this. There was no point in making a fool of himself by resisting. Moreover, the public opinion within the White Eagle was already nearly crushing him. If he delayed any longer, he wouldn't even have the chance to betray his country. Fine. Since everyone has reached an agreement, we will proceed on Great Xia's terms. Soon, A new round of video conferencing was re-established. The Great Xia cabinet appeared on the screen once again. Only this time, the momentum between the two sides had completely shifted. The once arrogant representatives of the various nations now wore complex expressions, their postures humble, while on Great Xia's side, they appeared composed and calm. Regarding the conditions you proposed, we agree. All nations have reached a consensus. Let's stick to what was previously agreed. We will provide an explanation to the citizens shortly. I hope you will stop applying pressure. Those words are almost a plea. Hearing this, Elder Li remained calm. The benefits have already been secured. As for saving face, is no longer important for the current Great Xia. Besides, if we truly back these countries into a corner, it wouldn't benefit Great Xia at this stage. Thus, Elder Li nodded. Fine, we will cooperate with your official narrative, on the condition that the things you promised are delivered promptly. As the words fell, inside the cabinet meeting room, everyone's gaze turned fervent. Looking at those gazes, Robert felt a chill run down his spine. He knew he was personally feeding a behemoth that might one day devour the world. But he had no way back. The agreement was quickly finalized. The moment the signing was complete, the representatives of various nations seemed to sigh in relief simultaneously. Losers have no right to set conditions. Being able to save some dignity was already the best possible outcome. While the nations began to fulfill their promises, Great Xia had already moved to the next step. The Ghost Control Bureau's exclusive training ground. Ji Ruyan stood in the center of the field. Her expression was focused and solemn. And opposite her, I stood with my hands behind my back. Remember, Holy Maiden is not just a title. You represent my will. Hearing this, Ji Ruyan nodded solemnly. I understand, I continued. You must learn to govern, not through brute force, but through faith, order, and fear. As my voice faded, a massive surge of supernatural power flooded into Ji Ruyan's body like a tide. She let out a soft grunt, but forced herself to remain steady. The ghost-controlling power rapidly circulated and evolved within her. An invisible barrier was quietly shattered. Her aura climbed steadily. A hint of satisfaction appeared in my eyes. Ji Ruyan's comprehension was even higher than I had anticipated. Her accumulation from her past life, combined with the blessing of her current status as Holy Maiden, made her growth exceptionally smooth. I gave a faint evaluation. Not bad. From this day forward, you shall truly begin to fulfill the duties of the Holy Maiden. Ji Ruyan took a deep breath. Her gaze was resolute. She knew very well that what she would face next would no longer be mere cultivation. Meanwhile, inside the cabinet meeting room, a brand new strategic plan led by Elder Li was being formally put on the agenda. Document after document was continuously projected onto the giant screen. The core members of the think tank gathered together. Based on the actual situation across Great Xia, they began to formulate a brand new management system for ghost controllers. With the full arrival of the Great Ghost Era, the old system had clearly fallen behind the pace, especially the Ghost Control Bureau. In the era when the supernatural first appeared, the Bureau was practically the absolute hegemon of the regions. They were the sole maintainers of order, and the only hope in the hearts of ordinary people, capable of fighting the supernatural. But things are different now. With the surge in the number of ghost controllers, awakened individuals were emerging everywhere. The old, closed-off model had revealed obvious lags. It could no longer operate the way it used to. Otherwise, before long, the system would collapse. This was the consensus reached by the think tank. Limit power, expand intake, and systematize cultivation. This was the core direction of the new system. The Ghost Control Bureau would no longer be a privileged institution for a few, but the core hub of Great Xia's ghost controller system. A vast number of new ghost controllers began to emerge. Among them were no shortage of true geniuses. These talents are the true future of Great Xia. Regarding this, both Elder Li and I held extremely high expectations, especially me. I knew one thing better than anyone else. The stronger the ghost controllers, the purer the power of faith fed back to me. The higher the rank, the closer they get to the source. And because of this, Elder Li and I repeatedly simulated scenarios in the cabinet, continuously making corrections, until we finally finalized a complete set of reform and implementation plans covering the entire country. Soon, orders were rapidly transmitted from the top down. Ghost control bureaus across the country country almost simultaneously, released public announcements for recruiting newcomers. In an instant, all of Great Xia was completely electrified. Crowds surged at the entrances of the bureaus everywhere. Wave after wave of young figures stepped inside, carrying excitement and longing. I want to join the Ghost Control Bureau. I want to follow Lord Chen Feng to protect Great Xia. Similar voices echoed continuously across the nation. And right at that moment, a single slogan completely ignited everyone's passion. Join the Ghost Control Bureau, and you will have the chance to become the next holy maiden, Ji Ruyan. These words struck like a thunderbolt across the north and south of Great Xia, because Ji Ruyan's deeds had already spread throughout the country, rising to S rank within days. Serving by my side, that almost mythical transformation drove all ghost controllers wild, especially those young people who believed themselves to be exceptionally gifted. For the first time, they clearly realized that there was such a path to success. Talent is important, but there is a more direct way than effort, and that is to be watched by a god. My existence was completely deified at this moment. Faith became more stable than ever before. At the same time, news that Great Xia had signed agreements with various nations and obtained vast resources and privileges spread rapidly. Once this news was confirmed, ghost controllers nationwide fell into a frenzy once again. Meanwhile, at Elder Li's invitation, I stepped back into the cabinet meeting. Almost everyone in the room stood up simultaneously. Elder Li stepped forward quickly. Mr. Chen, it has been a while. You look even more spirited than before. I waved my hand. Enough. From here on, you handle the coordination. I will only oversee the big picture. Remember, every expedition team must carry my avatar statue with them. With it, I can descend at any time. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the meeting room was instantly ignited.
Elder Linudda Havili.
Please rest assured, we have already included them in the standard equipment. Not a single team will be overlooked. Soon, the cabinet meeting room operated at high speed. Order after order was rapidly issued. The batches of expedition teams were officially confirmed, led by the military, assisted by the local ghost control bureaus. The goal was clear: establish stable settlements in the wasteland areas. When the final confirmation was complete, all screens lit up. The faces of the expedition teams appeared on the screens. They were fully equipped and ready to go. Right then, the gazes of everyone in the cabinet were focused on me, awaiting my command. Set sail. Great Xia. As soon as these words were spoken, countless responses almost simultaneously exploded through the communication channels. All exploration teams officially set out. Soon, real-time footage streamed back to the cabinet meeting room. Orders echoed continuously through the comms channel. Everyone could clearly feel it. My prestige had seeped into the very bones and blood of every team. My name itself was the source of morale. One could even say that the exploration teams at this moment were no longer troops in the ordinary sense, but a true army of fanatics. They knew no fatigue and feared no death. Every charge carried an absolute, cold ruthlessness. To them, the aberrations were merely targets, obstacles that had to be cleared. The Great Xia border bloomed in all directions. Battles erupted almost simultaneously. Elder Li watched the screen, his face beaming with joy. Good, wonderful. These are all my Great Xia's finest soldiers. Every single one of them is a treasure. Notify the front lines. Tell them to watch their pace. Advance steadily. Personnel safety is always the top priority. The order was relayed quickly, but the reaction from the front was completely unexpected. Far from slowing down, their pace actually accelerated further. Wherever they passed, not a single aberration escaped. For the first time, the aberrations felt the true terror of being hunted. And in the process, the growth rate of Great Xia's ghost hunters was terrifying. Their strength was skyrocketing. But in contrast, I frowned, because I felt things were going too smoothly. It was becoming unnatural. Isn't the number of aberrations a bit too low? And this thought, almost at the exact same time, also appeared in the intelligence team's simulations. Inside the cabinet,
Elder Lisbro Furuba.
his intuition was screaming a warning. But just then, in the front-line footage, the signal in one area suddenly became chaotic. Following that, ear-piercing static mixed with urgent breathing came intermittently through the comms channel. This is the Beijing 3rd Exploration Team. We've encountered an anomaly. The number of aberrations is increasing abnormally. Before the voice could finish, the screen suddenly went black. The next second, a glaring red warning box popped up directly on the main screen. Signal lost. Switch to backup channel immediately. Retrieve tactical footage from surrounding teams. The order was practically roared. Technicians' fingers hammered frantically on the consoles. A few short seconds felt as if they were stretched infinitely. Soon, new footage was forced through. It was a wasteland. The sky was gloomy, as if something were blotting out the light. The area on the ground, which had been mostly cleared, was now swarming with aberrations. The sheer number was enough to make one's skin crawl. And what was even more heart-stopping was their state. They were no longer fighting individually, no longer wandering in chaos, but were forming a distinct formation, as if they were forcibly unified by some will. Humans, you have crossed the line. At that moment, the entire cabinet room fell silent. Even Elder Li, who had weathered countless storms, couldn't help but clench his fists. He realized one thing: they were no longer facing scattered wild aberrations, but an organized, conscious aberration collective, perhaps even with a commander. At the same time, the air on the Beijing 3rd Team's battlefield seemed to freeze. The once unstoppable advance was forcibly brought to a halt. Captain, they're looking at us. Hold the formation. Hold the line. Everyone, remember our training. We are the pioneers of Great Xia. His voice, through the comms channel, reached every member's ears clearly. But in the next second, the ground suddenly shook. Countless high-level aberrations erupted from the earth, their auras intertwined, creating a suffocating field of pressure. The team captain quickly ordered. The fire net deployed instantly. Within a few short seconds, dozens of aberrations were blasted to pieces. But it was useless. The speed at which they filled the gaps was faster than the speed they fell, as if everything had been calculated in advance. Finally, the first soldier had his defenses torn apart by a high-speed aberration. Blood splattered. In the comms channel, a short, abruptly cut-off scream rang out. This was the first actual casualty since the start of Great Xia's exploration. The team's morale suffered a momentary shake, and at that very moment, a member who had remained silent suddenly looked up. He wore a statue on his chest containing my avatar. The statue began to glow, not blinding, yet impossible to ignore. Guardian God, please descend. The moment the words fell, the world suddenly went silent. All the aberrations froze for a beat. The next second, above the sky, an indescribable rift was forcibly torn open. Then, my figure slowly stepped out of the rift. With just one glance, those high-level aberrations, previously so ferocious, instinctively retreated. I slowly raised my hand and spoke. A collective? Who gave you the right? Within my domain, aberrations only deserve to be swept away. As the words fell, the world changed color. An unstoppable force poured down like divine punishment. The next second, swaths of aberrations vanished in silence, without even time to scream, as if they had never existed. And in the distant meeting rooms of various nations, everyone who saw this through secret channels fell silent together. They finally understood one thing: the so-called aberration collective, in my presence, was nothing more than a swarm of suicidal insects, and the true terror had only just begun. The moment my avatar descended upon the Beijing wasteland, the shock was not just for the Great Xia exploration teams on the field, but for the whole world, because this battle was never just about Great Xia from the start. This was a tacitly public operation. Originally, the nations just wanted to see if Great Xia would suffer losses in the first wave, wanted to see if the legendary guardian god of Great Xia also had blind spots, but they never imagined that this is the scene they would witness. With just a single raise of my hand, the specters vanished into ash. No resistance, not even a trace of their existence remained. Meanwhile, in the United States, not a single word was spoken in the conference room. Even the representatives of the hardline hawks felt as if they were being strangled. It wasn't that they hadn't seen powerful beings, but they had never encountered an existence so utterly unreasonable. After a few seconds of heavy silence, someone spoke in a dry, raspy voice. "This isn't a ghost hunter. This is a god." As soon as those words were uttered, no one disagreed. Not even a single thought of contradiction arose. Robert slowly opened his eyes. In that moment, he realized with absolute clarity that all previous compromises and concessions were not humiliations, but a means of survival. And when the technically processed combat footage was uploaded to social media and news channels, was broadcast across all social platforms and various forums, the whole world seemed to hit the pause button. Then came the explosion of reactions. "Is this CG? Tell me this is just special effects. That's a Spectre collective, marked as untouchable in our national intelligence. Who is that man?" Countless languages, countless words, flooded the global internet in a matter of minutes. Some questioned it, some didn't believe it, but soon, the silence of official governments became the most brutal answer. Quickly, the tide of public opinion shifted. Initially, the fear was directed at the Spectres, but now, more and more people began to realize one fact. If the Spectres are like ants before that man, then what about us ordinary people? If he becomes an enemy, do we even have a chance to survive? Such voices began to emerge quietly and then spread rapidly. In contrast to the global chaos, Grazia was consumed by a single word: frenzy. The Ghost Hunter forums completely crashed. Social media servers were overloaded. Countless people replayed that footage over and over. Some even spontaneously lit incense on the streets. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, my clone had slowly dissipated. The northern wastelands returned to silence, leaving behind only wreckage and the surviving Grazia. Pioneer teams. In the communication channel, countless voices filled with suppressed excitement and awe rang out. "Guardian Lord, the mission area has been cleared." At the same time, inside the cabinet meeting room, Elder Lee looked at the constantly updating battle reports, his expression firmer than ever before. Because the first phase was completed, 3 times faster than expected. All Pioneer teams do not stop. Continue the advance according to the original plan. This time, no one questioned it, and no one hesitated, because everyone knew exactly who was standing behind them. Through the communication channels, order after order quickly spread to every direction of the Grazia border. The Grazia Pioneer teams, like a torrent of steel, officially began their crushing advance outward. And upon the wasteland, as the second wave of Pioneers entered the designated area, the screams of Spectres echoed from the darkness. This was a mindless, swarming colony of Spectres, massive in number, with chaotic auras. In the past, this would have been enough to make any nation recoil. But now, in the center of the team, stood a gray-black statue of the clone. The moment the first Spectre stepped into the warning zone, the statue's eyes lit up. The next second, the void tore open, and my clone descended directly. The spectral aura was instantly seized by an invisible hand, compressed and annihilated. The entire process took less than 10 seconds. In the communication channel, after a brief moment of dead silence, an uncontrollable explosion of joy erupted. Right then, the morale of all Pioneer team members reached its peak. After the Spectres were completely purged, the engineering team moved in quickly.
Armurat vehicles ruarat.
And modular base construction was rapidly deployed. High-energy defense arrays were activated, and faith amplification devices were synced with the clone statue. In just a few hours, a standardized frontline base rose from the ground. Right then, this was no longer a wasteland, but the land of Grazia. Elder Lee stood before the cabinet's giant screen, watching the base ID light up officially. His voice trembled slightly. "Base 001 recorded. This is our first step outward."